So who are we? The North Saskatchewan Riverkeeper is a program. It's a local water body preservation group based in Edmonton, as David said. We're dedicated to being a united voice for the North Saskatchewan River watershed, which encompasses an area about the size of England, starting with the Rocky Mountain headwaters to where the forks meet in Prince Albert. We believe in a collaborative approach, so when I say a united voice, this encompasses all communities, other organizations interested in maintaining water quality and quantity in the watershed. We're a registered charity and a licensed member of the Waterkeeper Alliance, which is an international organization. As you can see, over 200 grassroots organizations worldwide, headquartered in New York State, and there are currently 9 Waterkeeper programs in Canada, grassroots programs doing a lot of the work that we do in the North Saskatchewan River watershed and in Alberta as a whole. I mentioned collaboration. We're also a member of the Alberta Environmental Network and a member of the Alberta Water Caucus, for which I'm the coordinator. This allows us to bring voice for certain water conversations or consultations in a collaborative approach to government and other stakeholders. So our vision is a North Saskatchewan River watershed, but at Alberta watersheds where we can all have the ability to safely and enjoyably swim, drink, and fish. And we know if we can accomplish this vision, both humans and the environment will benefit from this vision and what the end goal would be. Our 2-year plan, most importantly, is to respond to citizen concerns and complaints with respect to questions. We want people to ask questions, and we want to have the ability to answer those questions. We focus on education, outreach, consultations in the Edmonton area and Capital Region primarily, but as David mentioned, we are also branching out into Alberta because of interest in central Alberta lakes and Alberta lake quality as a whole. But we also want to highlight the issues and the assets of water quality in North Saskatchewan River and Alberta as a whole. We don't always want to be focusing on the issues. There are fantastic water assets in Alberta. We know that if we inform people about the issues, but we connect people to a lot of our fantastic recreational assets. People who are connected to these watersheds, these water bodies, will be protecting these water bodies, and we really seek to encourage that as well. So David mentioned the swim guide. One of the ways we've kind of captured both informing and connecting people to their Alberta water bodies is through the swim guide. You can all have a look at the website, theswimguide.org. What the swim guide is it provides daily updates for water quality on all the beaches in Alberta that are publicly monitored by statute. And it's been very successful today. We've had over 100,000 views in Alberta over the last 2 years. So people, families, communities can go out if they're looking to connect to their water body, whether it's local or a lake up north. They're provided a water quality update and information on those specific beaches in those areas. So if there's a blue-green algae advisory, they know about that blue-green algae advisory. Does that mean they're discouraged from going to other places in Alberta? No, we want people to not be discouraged by a particular advisory, but to seek out other opportunities for recreation. So one of the things that I was asked to do in this brief presentation is to go over the state of the water in Alberta. What are some of the processes in place? What are some of the issues? And then what could be a path moving forward? So again, I'm presenting these as kind of points for discussion and to stimulate questions. This could be a conference unto itself, this one slide. But just to give you a brief overview, I mentioned central and southern Alberta lakes are threatened by blue-green algae. And as many of you are aware, there's potential for aquatic invasive species in Alberta. I think the government, via the project team with the Alberta Water Council, has taken a proactive approach to this, but it is an issue on the horizon potentially. When we look at state of the water in Alberta for rivers, I think it's a very mixed bag. We have a lot of rivers that have been maintained, a lot of river quality is improved in certain reaches, even within the North Saskatchewan River. We're seeing improvements, but there are issues with certain reaches of other rivers. I think the overall message is it's a mixed bag, and there's a lot more baseline and further monitoring research required to truly identify what are the issues, but what is the path moving forward. Again, you'll have the lower Athabasca, where water quality would be an issue. And in southern Alberta, a number of the rivers, you'd be looking at water quantity as an issue. Tributaries, a whole other part of the river systems, again, in many parts of Alberta, would be considered in poor shape. You'll have a healthy main stem, but some of the tributaries, such as the Battle River, Sturgeon River, many of the reaches of these specific tributaries would be considered in poor condition. Again, there's a number of different cumulative effects on these that include nutrients from agriculture running off into these particular tributaries. So it is an issue, but it's also kind of the state of the tributaries. Wetlands, another, you mentioned we've been blessed with a lot of hydrocarbon wealth in Alberta. We also have a wealth of wetlands in both northern, central, and southern Alberta. You can see a loss of 67% in the white area, or the developed part of Alberta. The green area, as we know, is northern Alberta. A lot of it's crown land. And again, with the new wetland policy, I think, sorry for the voice, a lot of what we're seeing is there is no guarantee currently with the wetland policy we have in place that there will be no net loss of wetlands. So it's something we have to consider moving forward, that the current state of Alberta wetlands is threatened. We have incurred significant loss, and moving forward, there's no guarantees that that's not going to get worse. So what are the issues? I already mentioned briefly, nutrient input leading to increased blue-green algae advisories. You can see the trend moving forward, and a lot of this, I have to make clear, is actually through increased monitoring by Alberta Health Services, who should be credited with this focus on increased monitoring for this human health risk. A lot of other jurisdictions in Canada, North America, and internationally do not monitor for blue-green algae. Alberta does monitor for blue-green algae. They actually have recreational guidelines around it now. So it's something that should be commended, but it's something that we really have to be aware of, because there's 36 blue-green algae advisories in Alberta last year, in central Alberta lakes predominantly. And this is a trend moving forward that, as I mentioned, people's ability to connect with their waters in a safe and healthy way is seriously threatened with blue-green algae. The rivers, industrial input, agricultural nutrients are reducing water quality. Again, it's very situational, very specific to certain reaches, but overall, this is something that has to be considered, and surface water withdrawals in southern Alberta is an issue, and it's a conversation that we have to have moving forward, because the trend that you would see is currently untenable. I mentioned tributaries, smaller rivers, very similar issues. Reduced water quality as a result of agricultural activity, primarily nutrients and wastewater into the water, increased algal activity or plant growth, and it reduces the water quality. And it also inhibits aquatic life in these areas. Wetlands, all over the white area, we're seeing destruction of because of residential and industrial development. We're seeing an actual loss of aquatic and terrestrial habitat. The idea of a no net loss of wetlands is not currently the state of wetlands in Alberta, and this is something I believe, like through synergy groups, that can be asking questions about these areas. Other issues we touched upon, of course, is another conference unto itself, but groundwater, looking into the science, the monitoring, legislation, and enforcement behind a number of these issues. So what are the processes in place? This is a question that was asked of me by the Synergy organizers. And I will say there has been a significant number of consultative processes in Alberta related to water. We know the Water for Life strategy was introduced in 2003, which is 10 years now. There has been a significant amount of both public and stakeholder processes. We have the WPACs in each watershed, providing state of the watershed reports, and also looking for consultation on integrated watershed management plans. We have the regional plans that have been put in place or out for consultation, the Lower Athabasca regional plan and the South Saskatchewan regional plan. We have Alberta Water Council project teams that have been a number of different areas, including wetland policy, riparian policy, water allocation, conservation, efficiency, productivity plans for industry, and non-point source pollution plans. These consultations have gone out there. They've asked for stakeholder reports on this and research. We talked about the water conversations. There's been significant public and stakeholder consultation on these 4 tenets of water quality and quantity. And we have the Alberta Energy Regulator public consultations, which occurred last year. So I don't think there's been any issue with respect to have we been consulted. There might be an issue how we've been consulted, but I do think the processes are in place for both public and stakeholder feedback. And I think the next step moving forward, and the question that we're asking is, when we are consulted, when we see the implementation of these specific policies, have we been heard? We're looking for specifics in these policies to ensure that we have been heard. One of the questions is, what can synergy groups do? That's what we're here for. The synergy groups are put in place to improve, Alberta as a whole moving forward. So I'd say the first thing, you're here, so keep up the good work. You are here, you care. I think most people who are involved with synergy groups are people who, there's a lot of other things we could be doing with our days, but they're here, they're interested, and they're providing feedback, and they are asking questions. So I think the encouraging thing is you are here and you do care. I think we always have to ask the question and evaluate the actual implementation of water policy moving forward in Alberta and in federal jurisdictions as well. We have to ask for proactive implementation and enforcement of these specific policies, regulations, whether it's groundwater contamination, flooding. We've seen the flooding. We saw a report in 2007 because of the flooding in 2005. We always have to evaluate, are these reports being implemented? Because they are, as you all know, only as good as the implementation. And there is a lot of very, very good quality reports and project reports that have been developed in Alberta. We have to understand and keep reminding ourselves, and I have to do this myself, is the government is the steward of our water by law, both legislative, constitutional, and common law. A lot of voluntary efforts occur in Alberta, both through synergy groups and a number of other stewardship organizations, and industry as well, voluntary industry initiatives. But the mandate has to be the fact that the government is the steward and they have to be the leader on this. I would say when we talk about this leadership, we have to be looking at very, very long-term goals. And the reason for that is, if we look back 50 years or 100 years, and we look at the development of our water and our resources, if we take that and move forward, that's where the situation becomes untenable. The state of water today might be a tenable situation, but if we look at the trend from 50 to 100 years backwards and project that forwards, that's where we have to look at things and say things might have to change. Now, a lot of what is going on in Alberta is seeking to change that trend, and when I put this together, how do we secure a clean water future, I want to make clear that a lot of this is in place, or it's trying to be implemented. But I just put this together kind of for my own sanity, so I can understand maybe some of the things that I might recommend moving forward. I think we have to realize research, mapping, baseline monitoring, a lot of this work has not been done. It needs to be done. We never know. If we don't know where we're coming from, we don't know how to set up the future for monitoring and what we're trying to monitor for. We really have to prioritize. I think a science-based approach to triaging some of the most threatened and significant natural areas in the very, very near term will serve our long-term goals. This could be achieved through riparian policy, making riparian areas no-go zones. I think there could be an approach that would just see certain areas considered either threatened or damaged or significant that could just be considered no-go zones until we come up with a plan that can actually see these developed responsibly and sustainably. Strategize, again, I think there's been a lot of strategizing going on. There's been no shortage of land and watershed plans with specifics and metrics for all stakeholders who want this type of certainty. And we have to legitimize A lot of this is about the fact that this has to become legislation, it has to become law to be implemented. The water quality and quantity issues solved by legislative changes, these are there. We have the legislation in place. It's just that this legislation has to be implemented appropriately, such as the Water Act and other acts that relate to water in Alberta. We have to actualize, we have to implement, regulate, enforce, evaluate, repeat. We have to synergize. I think the one key thing we look at is today's wants need to be synergized with our environmental needs moving forward. The other area is improvise. We need to maintain or improve our current state of water, and maybe current technologies will develop that will see improvements in the way we can develop our land use. And again, the final point I'd like to make is we do have to harmonize. We all have a role to play here. That's why we're all here. And I always ask myself, and I think we all ask everybody, is what are we going to be remembered for when we are developing these policies? I thank you.